Do you want to bust your sales quota? Do you want to join the ranks of top 1% sellers? The Top 1% Sellers podcast gives you the insights and the tools to help you achieve your sales greatness. The podcast features sales and services professionals, leaders, and experts to give you the edge you're looking for. Here's your host, Ash Sadiq.
So upgrading your network is an essential skill, and there's two things that that fit underneath upgrading your network that's called luck and magic, and I want to break them down for you now because I think this is kind of fun and sexy, and I'll just remind everyone that I think we worked out, Ash, that you're going to share some bit of the book, The First Habit, which kicks off all three of these habits.
Yes.
With your community. So, okay, so luck. Luck is what I think of as a fancy word for, the fancy word that describes it is transitivity. And so what does transitivity mean? Well, so we've got networks right now, and some of those networks are made up of people who need each other and know each other. For example, let's say you're in the trucking industry, okay? And you go to the annual trucking convention, and that's a very important place to be. But the reality is, while those people in that industry need each other, they all know each other. It's not so easy to create luck for yourself when you're one of 20 other trucking companies that show up at the trucking convention. Yeah. There's good education, don't get me wrong, but there's not a lot of luck to be created in that room. Then you've got other networks where, let's just say you're in a public place like the airport, where you don't know if you need each other and you don't know each other. Also very hard to create business luck in an airport or in some large public place.
Absolutely.
Now take don't need each other but know each other, which would be like, I joke, this is about your friends from high school. Basically, you know each other, but you don't really need each other. I don't mean you don't emotionally need each other. I mean, You don't create a lot of business opportunity when 10 of your best friends all know each other and they all know everything about each other, and there's not much luck to be created in that environment.
Yes.
There's really only one configuration that creates luck, which is the fundamental permutation of a nodal network, which is when you need each other and don't know each other. You see, the beauty of a network of people who know people, like that full-bloomed butterfly,
yes,
is that there's a lot of activity taking place of people who need each other, but they don't always know each other. But if you've got real business intimacy with the 5 people in your core network, and they're practicing nodal networking themselves, and when someone says, hey, I've got this problem, and then they share it with someone, and because there's enough sharing going on at the business intimacy level, they'll say, oh, you should send it to this other person who knows a person whose name is Ash, and he actually has a need for that.
Yes.
And that's when everyone comes back to that lucky moment when you say, how'd you get that job? How'd you get that account? How'd you get that opportunity? It's always, Ash called me. He called me to tell me about it. It's always a person who introduces you to that opportunity.
Exactly.
That's the nodal network. So a network of people who need each other and don't know each other. And so as complicated as all this might sound to you, really what you have to do, which sounds easy but is actually hard, if in the age of social media, we're all supposed to have 500 and 5,000 connections, is actually find 5 people, just 5 people, and just have a strong, intimate business connection to them. That's how luck comes your way. And just be sure that those 5 people understand that they've got to be building their own nodal networks too, not just relying on yours, but building out. So the magic part of this, which I love, is what you mentioned earlier. It's social contagion. It's just, we all know what contagion is. So there's that full blooming network again of nodal network. And what's contagion? Somebody who's got a cold, without ever knowing the other person, passes the germs on to somebody else, okay? Because they both held the same pole in the bus, and the next thing you know, through contagion, this other person is sick. And social contagion works exactly the same way. So we've got this person who went through one of my programs named Darren Janelle, and he found great success in it. And then we've got someone else who I get a chance to work with a lot. Her name is Leanna Ling, and she experienced greater success. And when we talked about why she was having this renewed success, it had a lot to do with the fact that she was connected to a person who was connected to a person who was connected to Darren. These are what successful networks look like. It's like any other contagion. It's actually magic. And the reason I call it magic is we can't see it happening, but it's working for us. That's what magic is. And so the magic of putting yourself in a network of people who have the same 3 habits in mind, the same success orientation, proves itself out in a form of contagion or magic. You just can't see it working. And it's true in negative and positive ways. There's a ton of data. You want to quit smoking? Don't hang out with people who smoke. You want to lose weight? Hang out with people who go to the gym. You know, if you try to break this, if you try to be the one person quitting smoking while everyone around you still smokes, it's a much higher failure rate. The reverse is true. You want to be successful? Hang out with people who want to be successful too.
Makes a lot of sense.
So now imagine pulling together a network where luck and magic are working for you. It's what I call the ultimate success network. And so imagine, for example, what Darren put together. So Darren has me, you know, on his nodal network because he and I work together. And he's got Leanna Ling by extension on his network. And what I do through my properties, my project, is I bring some other folks to the table, people that you may or may not have ever met. This is Tony Hsieh from Zappos. His success is palpable. His methodology, his philosophy is very much available for people to learn through our system. Russell Simmons, I mentioned earlier. So your network can ultimately be this sort of blooming network where you're practicing social contagion by putting yourself in the middle of a success network or where luck and magic come together, all by understanding the underpinnings of what a success network looks like, right?
Absolutely.
And I always encourage people to imagine what their lives would be like if they were in the center of this network. You know, and again, you know now that nothing's stopping you. This is not about technology. This is not about, you know, some expensive program. This is just about executing on this 3-step philosophy.
Yeah.
And so what I do with people, Ash, is, you know, forget all that other stuff, just start small.
Yes.
Is I work with something called Immersive Mentoring, where essentially you can learn from people like Tony Hsieh or Russell Simmons just by being around their success philosophy, just by exposing yourself to the way they do it. And if you could imagine, if you can fast forward when you've spent time with the Tony Hsiehs of the world and you've learned how they approach decision-making and team building and risk and just had a chance to hear how they do it, what would your life be like? And so think about who you are today. You're not focused, you're afraid of failure, and you're not spending time with the right people. And imagine going through this rewiring process, which really looks at all these different areas of our lives that are hampered by the way we've grown up, and think about what it would be like to be focused on one thing or 2 things. Yes. And be able to make decisions, because failure is not a bad thing, and building a network where luck actually does find you. Imagine how amazing that would be. And then fast forward, right? Imagine where all this stuff has been working for a while.
Exactly.
You have figured out, you've proven yourself that you have what it takes to succeed, and that all the sacrifice you've put into the work you've done is worth it. And ultimately, you are part of a business that everyone knows about. Because this, when we talk about successful people we admire, Ash, this is how they live their lives. That's what they have. And I don't see any reason why any one of us who's watching this now or thinking about how success can find them can't accomplish all this, as long as they follow these 3 habits, and as long as they honor the fact that they have to learn how to practice these 3 habits from people who have done it already, and maybe pay a little less attention to the parents whispering in our ear, or the old school teachers, and in many instances, even our bosses, who are teaching us a way of creating wealth and success that just doesn't kind of tie into the way the world is now.
Absolutely. That makes a lot of sense. And I think, to your point, then the first thing people have to do is really catch those thought processes, really know what the source is, how far back it is, or maybe, to your point, maybe it's a conversation with your current manager that you may not be getting the right guidance. And the concept of immersive mentoring, whether they do that through working with you, Lewis, or other sources, at least they know specifically what needs to happen as a result, and really rebuild their network, rebuild their thought process.
Right. And the easiest way to do that by far is to be around people who've done it. It's just the easiest, it's magic. Yeah. And so, you know, a lot of people with mentoring, here's what they do. They say, can I sit with you, Ash, or can I sit with you, Lewis, and tell you all the things going on in my life? And I appreciate that. But you know what works better? Hang around with really successful people, and you'll find that they give you the answers without you even asking the questions, because they're living it, they're breathing it, they're acting on it. So if I put someone together with Tony Hsieh in person, and that person says, I run a real estate company, and I don't seem to be getting the kind of traction I'm looking for. Better be this. Just watch Tony do what he does. Just pay attention. You'll see how he operates and how he thinks, and you'll see through osmosis that you start operating that way too.
Absolutely. And as you and I talked, Lewis, earlier on when we tried to plan this up, and when you take a look at sales professionals, most of them are essentially like franchise owners. They run their own book of business. And I love you to talk about, you work with a lot of entrepreneurs and business owners, as we said in the introduction. And as you think about that sales professional as a franchise owner, having to actually help others do exactly what we just talked about today, that they have to flip and be the person that sort of guides that. Mm-hmm. What else can you tell that sales account manager to bear in mind their own self-management and direction, and then the people around them?
Well, I think that this is maybe a conversation that we could also move into at another time, but I think that there is a portion of sales that the best salespeople are really good at, and that there's about a half a dozen other things salespeople have to do that they're not particularly good at. And I think, just as simple as saying, here's what's great about being an entrepreneur. You can say, because I'm really good at this, I'm going to hire people to do all that other stuff.
Yes.
When you're in any level of employment, you have a harder time saying that. However, salespeople have, as we all know, have the most, influence at the companies they work for if they're delivering.
That's correct, yes.
So they can go to their boss and they can say, let me focus more on this and help support me with these other things I'm not so good at. I think that that's a realistic conversation.
Yes.
And I think if you work for someone who says, no, I want you to do the 10 things you're not good at and get better at them so you can do that 11th thing you're good at, I would think you'd want to work somewhere else, but that's my opinion.
Right.
But the beauty of being an owner of a company is that at some level, what you have to do is inflicted upon you. After all, as the owner of a company, you have to make sure all the taxes get paid. That's something none of us like to do, but as owners, we have to make sure it happens.
Yes.
We have to fire people. None of us like to do that, but that's something you have to make sure happens. But I also get to say, you know what? I'm going to get help doing a bunch of things I don't like doing so that I could focus on the thing I do like doing. And I think that to your question, how do they bring this to the salesperson level, is to adopt that methodology. Let me figure out what I'm good at. Let me spend more time doing it. And let me find other people who are really good at all the other parts I'm not good at. And let the success speak for itself.
Exactly. And I think a lot of the time, like I've seen at Cisco and Oracle, a lot of these account managers actually are managing a team that's sometimes, 15 people strong. And they have to really be very conscious about how can I put the right resource on the right task and focus area for the accounts. I think you just now raised their level of understanding. How do I even effectively make use of each person on that account team? And then when it comes to networking and relationships, they have to get very close and intimate, and it's not a broad brush around rapport as they typically would think of it.
I agree. Yeah, exactly. And salespeople are much, much, much more empowered to do this than, let's say, a person who's got a more of a expense side of the shop. If you're the person who spends money for the company, it's a lot harder to go to your boss and say, let me spend money in a way that's better for me. But if you're the person who says, I generate revenue for the company, I think it's a lot easier to say, let me help generate revenue in a way that works best for me.
That makes a lot of sense. Let's talk a little bit about how do you, if you can talk about your own world a little bit, Lewis, who do you work with, in what shape and form? And then in addition to your books, do you have online content that people can perhaps consume? If you can maybe talk to that, that'd be great.
Yeah, and I'm very excited about something we're doing now. And if any of your viewers want to talk more about it, I'm happy to. And you can give them my email address. But I work very closely with the owners of fast-growing companies. So that's a person, I'll just give you a kind of a profile. Let's say it's a $10 million revenue company. Let's say that company is growing at 25 to 50% a year. So that company is doubling in size every 3 years, okay? Which means if they have 20 people, they have 40 people within 3 years. If they work out of a piece of real estate, they rent an office that's 2,000 square feet, they've outgrown it within 18 months of signing the lease. I mean, there's so much going on in these companies, right?
Exactly.
So I have a lot of experience in helping people keep those companies the wheels on the wagon, and also to translate their early success into something that levels off into something that's much more sustainable.
Yes.
And so I work with companies anywhere from 2 million in revenue to about 150 million in revenue, and try to make sure that, think of it like a body at the gym. If you meet someone who's just working on their shoulders, I'm the kind of guy who says, let's work on the arms, the stomach, the core, the legs. Let's make sure the whole company works well, so that you're not just reliant on one strength, because any one of those strengths can falter at some point. Then the second thing I do is I'm increasingly working with salespeople to teach them a very particular discipline. I'm really excited about it. It's called sales amplification. And the reason I learned it is because the number one challenge of most business owners is driving revenue.
Exactly.
And I kind of became aware of some of the techniques that are being used by very big companies, maybe the kinds of companies that your community works for, but that leverage artificial intelligence and big data. And, we're at this wonderful moment right now where the kinds of companies I worked with forever are now able to leverage artificial intelligence and big data to help them with sales. And so I teach sales amplification. So I teach sales amplification to salespeople. I teach sales amplification to business owners. And I have a program called The Birthing of Giants that I teach to business owners that you have to apply to be in. And it's an exclusive school.
That's fantastic. I'm glad that we were able to cover that, because I think, a lot of people are doubling up. They have other businesses, or they may, to your point about networks, they may know someone that really needs what we just talked about. This has been fantastic. I'm glad we got to really kind of get the nuggets from a lot of your research, Lewis, and I'm sure the audience and a lot of people who join the Top 1% Sellers Academy over the long term would benefit greatly from this conversation we just had. And I'll definitely be sharing a lot of that also with people over time. I want to thank you so much for joining me. I know it took us a while to get here, and I'm glad we're here, and I'm glad we were able to cover this amazing content. Thank you so much, Lewis.
Thanks, Ash. I appreciate it.
Thank you so much. Well, goodbye, everyone. Please do join us in our next webinar coming up actually on the 2nd of November with Ty Bennett, where we will be talking about storytelling specifically for sales professionals, and we'll basically be leveraging Ty Bennett's experience working with sales professionals across industries, and really leveraging how do you implement storytelling in your messaging so that you're able to communicate your value proposition very effectively across business units and across lines of business where your solution will be used. So I definitely look forward to sharing with you that conversation. Stay connected with us on Twitter and Facebook, as well as LinkedIn. We will be sharing a lot of information on these upcoming webinars. And then also check the page on the Top 1% Sellers webinar as a whole, the different features where we would be having like the hotline, the hot seats, and the coaching opportunities. And we look forward to you joining this community and really thriving and building your business even more as a sales professional, and eventually really becoming a top 1% seller as well. Thank you for joining us. We'll see you next time. Bye-bye.
Thank you for tuning in to the Top 1% Sellers podcast. Give us your suggestions and guest recommendations by emailing us at ash@connectwithash.com. Thank you also for sharing this podcast with your colleagues and social media contacts. To connect with us on LinkedIn, please send a connect request to ash@connectwithash.com. See you at our next episode. Thanks for tuning in.